Father, we thank you for your love and your mercies to us. They come new every day. We're so thankful that you've called us and that we've been able to understand that you're bringing us out of the darkness into the light brighter and brighter. Help us, Lord, to have an experience in keeping with your desire for us. Bless us as we continue to grow. May we take the time to hear your spirit and to follow. We thank you that you're patient, and the more we understand your kindness, the more we can share that with others. Bless us now as we seek to understand your word, as we understand the part in prophecy that we're seeing all around us just now, and help us to see what our part is. We thank you in Jesus' precious name. Amen. We have spent a little bit of time with Daniel 11 and 12. Now, there's a whole lot more that can be said about those two chapters, but I hope we have seen something. That those two chapters were written, it said, for the wise, for the teachers. That's what we are looking at, is how to win souls, and you can't be a soul winner if you don't know how to teach. So the teachers are in Daniel 12 there. And it says the wicked will not understand. So that's a whole different group of people. What won't the wicked understand? They won't understand about 1844. They will not understand the third angel's message. They will not understand the law of God. They will not understand the Sabbath. They won't understand lots of things. But it says the teachers will shine like stars. And that's who we want to be. We want to be one of those that God can say, I'm going to make you have the light of a sun. See? That's pretty good light, isn't it? You know, you stand out there in the sunshine right now, as far away as it is and as cold as it seems, it'll burn you. The sun is powerful. Well, that's what God means to communicate to us. We become the power of God unto salvation to people as we're exposed to them. All right. We want to move through another side of this now, starting today. We want to understand what's going on prophetically today, right now, that we can understand and recognize. We're going to look at 3 chapters in Great Controversy. We're going to start the first one today. The first chapter is entitled Liberty of Conscience Threatened. I want to start reading a little bit on page 472. On page 472 it says, a prayerful study of the Bible would show Protestants the real character of the papacy and would cause them to abhor and to shun it. But many are so wise in their own conceits that they feel no need of humbly seeking God, that they may be led into the truth. Although priding themselves on their enlightenment, they are ignorant both of the Scriptures and of the power of God. See? She's talking about the Protestant world, not 100 years ago or not 50 years in the future, but right now, today. I don't know how many Protestants you talk to, so I don't know. But if you're talking to anybody out there and you mention Catholicism, oh yeah, just another church. It's not just another church. It's not even a church. The Protestants don't know that today. Now, I'm not reading this because there are a lot of Protestants here listening. We're here. When I say Roman Catholic, what does that do for you? What kind of bells does it ring? What kind of flags does it wave? What does it do to you? Roman Catholic, papacy. Do you immediately have something in your brain saying, the devil's representative? Or do you just say, oh yeah, the Catholic Church, that's just another church? See? Has that gotten to us too? That sentence we just read says, if the Protestants were to study their Bible, they would abhor the Catholic Church. That's a pretty big word, isn't it? They would shun it. But you know, today in Christianity Today, they have articles by Roman Catholics. They advertise Roman Catholic activities. They advertise Catholic books. That's Christianity Today. We, of course, know the Lutherans have signed some papers with the Catholics and say we all believe righteousness by faith now. You know, I wonder if Luther would have signed that paper 2 years ago or so when they got together. I think Luther knew something. They're never going to change. And we want to start looking at a couple of things in the Bible, and I'm going to go through to some Roman Catholic works to show what they believe about themselves. And when I said, I'm not talking about the people, because most of the people don't even know what Catholicism teaches. I'm talking about the priests, the bishops, the Pope, what they believe the Catholic Church is and what they're doing in the world today. On page 563, Romanism is now regarded by Protestants with far greater favor than in former years. In those countries where Catholicism is not in the ascendancy and the papists are taking a conciliatory course in order to gain influence, there is an increasing indifference concerning the doctrines that separate the Reformed churches from the papal hierarchy. The opinion is gaining ground that, after all, we do not differ so widely. We do not differ so widely upon vital points as was supposed. As was supposed by who? Luther, Calvin, Knox, Zwingli, all the people they were killing. And that a little concession on our part will bring us into a better understanding with Rome. Now, she wrote this 150 years ago. Well, if that was happening back in her day, where are we now? The time was when Protestants placed a high value upon the liberty of conscience, which had been so dearly purchased. They taught their children to abhor popery. Anybody here have a child that you taught to abhor popery? Does anybody in our church teach their children to abhor popery? How come? Did the Catholics change? Somebody changed. Uh-oh. The defenders of the papacy declare that the church has been maligned and the Protestant world are inclined to accept the statement. Many urge that it is unjust to judge the church of today by the abominations and absurdities that marked her reign during the centuries of ignorance and darkness. They excuse her horrible cruelty as a result of the barbarism of the times. Well, you know, there's a book, a little magazine in the library in the town where we live. It comes out every month. It's called Crisis. It's a Roman Catholic magazine. And I look at it every now and then to see what they're trying to do now. And just recently, that's just what they said. You can't judge us based on the barbarism of those times. There it is on the page. Have these persons forgotten the claim of infallibility put forth by this haughty power for hundreds of years? Infallibility. Now, when you think about infallibility, I hope you're not thinking about they said this theological thing and that's what they mean now. That's what it's going to stay. And here's what they said here. And it's because they do change some things. The infallibility is when the Pope tells you to do something, you have to obey. That's where the infallibility is, because he cannot tell you something wrong. And that's where every bishop in the Roman Catholic Church is. They are under the vow of obedience to that man. And every priest is under the same obedience to follow their superiors, no matter what they say. I'm going to read you some very interesting statements by the Jesuits on that before we're done. In other words, they have no mind when it comes to matters of the church. The only mind they have is what they're told by a superior. Now, you better believe there are a lot of people in the Roman Catholic Church who have good minds. And they have superior reasoning abilities. But when their mind starts telling them things the church doesn't say, they are taught to believe that's coming from the devil. So, if you come up to something and you see, well, here's what this says, this is what this is, and this is what you come out with, oh, the devil made me think that. What are you going to do with that? All right. In Mosheim's book, Institutes of Ecclesiastical History, he quotes the powers that be in the Roman Catholic Church as saying, the church has never erred. Never. And do you know they can never change that? That's impossible that they can ever say the church ever made a mistake, because then it wouldn't be the church according to their definition. So they can never relinquish that. And if that's not enough logically, there's a sentence right here on this page in Great Controversy. It says, the papal church will never relinquish her claim to infallibility. So you can mark it down. They're never going to give it up. That's page 564. Now, interestingly enough, some of the most powerful quotes that I know exist historically are right here in Great Controversy also. Ellen White quotes some of these tremendous quotations that everybody should know so that we have it handy. I'm going to read them to you eventually from their sources. But for now, we'll look at them in Great Controversy because Ellen White knew things that we need to pay attention to. And of course, she wasn't the only one. All of the pioneers in this church understood these very same things. All right, this is at the bottom of 564, Pope Pius IX. That is the name that you should remember. Pope Pius IX, in his encyclical letter of August 15, 1854, see, one of the reasons you should remember this name is this is the Pope that was around when Abraham Lincoln was on the scene. And we're going to get around to Abraham Lincoln before we're done here on this subject. This is what he said, quote, "The absurd and erroneous doctrines or ravings in defense of liberty of conscience are a most pestilential error, a pest of all others, most to be dreaded in a state." End of quote. That is the official position of the Roman Catholic Church. The papists are against freedom of conscience. They're against liberty. They're against the Constitution of the United States. They are enemies of America. Now, I haven't mentioned God's people yet. I'm talking about liberty of conscience, freedom. That's all I'm talking about. The Roman Catholic hierarchy is opposed to the idea. Why? Well, if the government has the final say about what you can believe or not believe or have freedom either way, then when the Catholic Church speaks, you don't have to listen. It's simple, isn't it? They hate a place where you don't have to listen to them. Do you realize it is on the agenda of the Roman Catholic system under the papacy to destroy the United States? This is not our subject today, but I just want to remind you, we went through a little bit of the Civil War. We didn't cover a lot of things. We just mentioned that the Northerners and the Southerners were both for slavery. What kind of Northerners? Roman Catholics. The generals that were giving the Southerners, the Southern generals, what they were going to do in terms of battle before the battle happened so that the Southerners would have an advantage were Roman Catholic generals. There were some few Roman Catholic generals that were loyal to Lincoln. We want to talk about him. One of them was Sherman, tremendous general. He was Roman Catholic, but he stayed loyal to the government. He paid a price too, by the way. Nobody does something against the Roman Catholic Church without paying a price eventually. Now, we're not talking about the Catholic people, right? We understand that. We love people no matter what they call themselves. We want them to be saved in God's kingdom according to His gospel, no matter where they are. We are talking about the system of the papacy. That cannot be saved. The same Pope in 1864, he anathematized. We know what that word means? He laid a papal curse on something. Okay, here's his curse. Those who assert the liberty of conscience and of religious worship, and all such as maintain that the church may not employ force. So if you believe in liberty of conscience, you've been cursed by the Pope. Okay? And if you say he can't use force to get his way, he cursed you again. Aren't you glad he doesn't have the power to do something about it right now? Because every time they get the power, they do exactly what they believe. I don't want to jump ahead of myself here, but I want to tell you, they're fast getting that power back. Every day I read something somewhere. Now, I don't believe the news, okay? I don't see TV, so I don't know what they're saying, but I wouldn't believe anything they say anyhow. I don't believe the newspapers. I don't believe the magazines. But when they tell me a fact, then I have something I can check on. If the fact tells me, today, a treaty we've held with such and such a country for 30 years was just struck down by the administration, that's a fact. What you want to make of it is an opinion, but that is a fact. I can go with that fact. Well, I look at facts, and every day something is hitting. Do you know that last week Pope Benedict put out the word, we need to protect the sanctity of Sunday? Yeah. He's not sitting around doing nothing. He's moving with the program. We need to protect the sanctity of Sunday. Well, we are looking at great controversy right now. On page 565, down at the bottom, it says Romanism as a system is no more in harmony with the gospel of Christ now than at any former period in our history. The Protestant churches are in great darkness, or they would discern the signs of the times. On the top of that page, a quote from Bishop O'Connor. Religious liberty is merely endured until the opposite can be carried into effect without peril to the Catholic world. The Archbishop of St. Louis said, heresy and unbelief are crimes. Now, was that over in Spain? Was that over in Italy? Was that over? That was in America. He says heresy and unbelief are crimes, and in Christian countries, as in Italy and Spain, the Catholic religion is an essential part of the law of the land, and they are punished as other crimes. So do you think that someday, maybe not too far in the future, this country is going to have laws that punish you if you don't agree with the major religion? I didn't say they won't like you. I didn't say they won't throw stones at you. I said they're going to pass laws. And we already know that if someday you disappear and your neighbors say, well, where's Brooks today? We don't know. A van came here in the middle of the night. We didn't see anything. And when he's sitting over in some little place that nobody knows about, he says, well, what'd I do? They're going to say, you know what you did. That's all they're going to say. Well, am I going to get to talk to somebody? Nope. Can I call my wife? Nope. Am I going to see a judge? No. Who am I going to see? Us. And if you don't quit talking, we're going to waterboard you right now. What are you going to do about it? You know, it doesn't sound so implausible anymore, does it? These things we used to talk about as prophecy, something horrible is going to happen to this country and this is going to happen way in the future. We don't think like that anymore, do we? Do you know that today the people who do the waterboarding are being asked, is that torture or isn't it in your mind? They say, oh no, that's not torture. Or why isn't it torture? Well, waterboarding is just a simulating drowning. Simulating. Have you ever been on a board with your head in the water so that you can't breathe and you're choking? What do you think is happening? I have news for you. Anybody who's got their head in the water like that and doesn't know when they're coming up is drowning. What is this game? Well, you know where we learned it? The people we're talking about. The papacy invented these techniques and the arguments. The Bible says that there's going to be an image to the beast. There's going to be something the United States is going to turn into that looks just like the papacy. Here all the time we thought it was the churches. It's the government. Revelation tells us they made an image to the beast. Who is they? It's 51% of the voters. They made the image so it would look like the papacy. A tyrant who would have control of everything. And if you disagree, you have a problem. Are you still looking into the future for these prophecies to be fulfilled? We better wake up. Now, you're not going to change the government. None of us can do that. You can vote as often as you want. You're not going to change the government. You're not going to stop senators and congressmen from being corrupt. You are not going to do it. You are not going to elect the right president. You're not going to do it. This country has been forever ruined. But it's in the book. We've been told about all of it. What's the big surprise? Why did God tell us all this? So we would be an answer to the problem. It's called the third angel's message. It's the only answer God ever made for our day. There is not another one. You want to talk abortion? Third angel's message answers that. You want to talk about the gay rights? The third angel answers that. You want to talk about abuse and power? The third angel answers that. God gave the third angel's message to his people to be the only thing that works on this planet. And if we think it just means, well, now you get to go to church on Saturday, I think we really missed something. We're no better than anybody else just because we go to church a day early. That doesn't do anything. Desire of Ages 289. Only a holy person can keep the Sabbath holy. Did you catch that one? Everybody else is still a Sunday keeper. I read something. I'm trying to remember the page. I remember the page. I remember the book. 471. I was reading so many books this morning. But I'll tell you what was on the page. It's talking to a parent. It says, you know, when you get all upset with your child because the child did not obey you, and you start ranting and raving, you really got upset. Why won't this child obey me? I said, you ought to remember something. You're just a grown-up child. And then it says, now, you're supposed to know certain things, and you get all upset when you're a child. But think about this, Ellen White says. How many times have you disobeyed God? What a thought. Here I am ranting and raving at this child. Who's ranting and raving at me? She says we're not all built the same. We don't all think the same. Give the child a chance. Be kind. Be tender. Have discipline, yes. Loving discipline. Have a few well-considered rules and follow those. But remember, that child is not exactly like you. But there's one place we're all the same. Obedience rubs us the wrong way until our mind is into it, our heart. And we say, oh, I love to know the Lord's will so I can do it. All right, so when we're looking at Roman Catholicism, we are not looking at humanity because we're all the same. We're looking at a religion that has been set up to counterfeit Christianity. And we've seen where it's going. It's against American principles. It's designed to destroy the United States. Do you know that the Pope was in touch with the King of France before the Civil War? And said, get ready, we may need you over there to tilt this thing one way or the other. And France was ready to go to war with the government of Abraham Lincoln on the side of the South. The Pope sent a letter to the President of the Confederation and said, do it, we're behind you. We'll back you all the way. We've got France ready to help you. Jefferson Davis got that letter from the Pope. And Jefferson Davis had all of his people were Catholics. As a matter of fact, the South was overrun with them. That's where slavery came from. No liberty, no freedom, no conscience. That's all Catholicism. And that's what that war was about, and Abraham Lincoln knew it. But he couldn't blow the whistle on the Roman Catholic bishops and the Pope because he knew something, and he said it. I have it in print. He says, we cannot stir up the Protestants with a knowledge of what the Roman Catholics are doing. We would have a religious war in this country that's worse than anything we can imagine. He said, we can't do it. But he knew what the papacy is. He knew what the Jesuits are. He knew the setup. Do you know that he knew they were going to kill him? He knew it and said so. And he knew why. He said a very interesting thing about Protestants. He said, when this war is over and we're going to win. Yeah, Yeah, he says when this war's over, we are going to win. Because God does not want this slavery issue continuing. He said, we are going to win. He says, when you whip a Protestant, let's say we've been whipped. We fought. We were manly. We were brave. We did what we needed to do, and we were whipped. Okay. He says, that's what Protestants do. He says, but the Roman Catholics don't do that. When they lose a war, they assassinate the leaders of the other side. Wow. He knew his history. King George, well, I won't go through the history. He knew what was going to happen to him. I often wondered, why did he go to that theater that night, without a guard? Why did he do that? Well, I have the answer now. Because he knew they were going to kill him, and he knew nothing could stop it. When he was asked, well, how are you going to protect yourself? He says, why should I do that? He said, we're all going to die. Yeah, he said, we are all going to die. He says, we don't need to be concerned about how or where or when. The only thing we need to know is, are we going to be standing at our post when it comes? That's all he was concerned about, was being a faithful president until that moment. And he was. He was not concerned. He went to the theater. And the fellow who was living at Mary Surratt's house with several priests is the one who did it, John Booth. And when he ran from there, he went to Dr. Mudd's house, a Roman Catholic physician. I won't give you much more history. I just want you to know there should be no mystery about any of these things. The spirit of prophecy and the Bible have told us, and it's happening again today. Do you know who 5 of the 9 members of the Supreme Court are? The majority of the Supreme Court believes in torture. Why? They're Roman Catholics. It's part of their religion. A majority of the people in Congress are tied to the Roman Catholic Church. And the image is formed in the administration, in the administration's thinking. Yes, the Protestant churches are in great darkness, but I don't think they're the only ones. She, the Roman Catholic Church, she is employing every device to extend her influence and increase her power in preparation for a fierce and determined conflict to regain control of the world. Now you have the agenda. They're working on it every day to get back where they control everything. And then they can tell everybody, you're going to be a Christian or else. That's the way they've always done it. You want to be a Christian? No, we'll ask you one more time. You want to be a Christian and keep your hands? What? Whoop! You see people walking around, oh, that's a Christian. They were converted. How much history do we need before we abhor the system? You see, don't fall into that trap of thinking, oh, they've changed. They're different now. They're civilized. They're so sweet. They're so kind. Well, there are a lot of really nice people in that communion, I have to say. You talk to a bishop, when you're not saying something he doesn't like, oh, he's as kind as can be, so soft-spoken, so nice. Oh, my son, oh, what can we do to help you? But you say, I'm not going to pray to Mary, and you have a problem. You are now a heretic, and heretics only deserve one thing. Confession. Do I dare get into it? Confession. What is that, confession? She brought up the Masons. Same thing. Same thing. We won't get into them for right now. Yeah. You're a Protestant. Have you ever been inside a confessional? Then you don't know what happens there, do you? I'll just give you a little bit today. I will read to you from a Catholic source what goes on in the confessional, so you know that it's right, what I'm saying. The Roman Catholic priest, when he's going through his education, first of all, studies all the pagan authors that can get into him in the years that he's at their school. Pagan. No Bible. No real theological content. The only theology they get is what the church says they must believe about purgatory. Pagan. And so after they've read all these pagan authors and studied them, then they study the church fathers, which don't agree on anything. And after they've gone through all that education, they have to swear that they will never teach anything except what the church fathers have unanimously agreed on. And you have to believe that there's many a priest who thought about that and said, well, what did the church fathers agree on? Because you can hardly find anything. And then they make them swear they will stay pure. And then the very next thing they do is start going through all the teachings of the church, not the church fathers, but the ones that came later, that says, here's what you do in the confessional. When that person is sitting in front of you, there's no way they can have their sins forgiven unless you forgive them. And you are to teach the people there is no forgiveness until you say it. They cannot go to heaven. They cannot have salvation until you forgive them their sins. All right, so you now have a big responsibility here. This person is sitting there talking to you, saying, well, Father, I did this and I did that. And then the priest says, okay, what else? Come on, you can't be forgiven unless you get it all out. And when the person finally says, that's it, they say, well, what about this? Oh, and what about this? And they are taught questions to ask. Now, I'm going to leave your sensibilities, and I hope I don't go too far. But when they get a woman in the confessional, they've got another set of questions. And when that teenage girl hits the confessional for the first time in their life, this priest starts telling them things they never even dreamed existed. They absolutely corrupt their minds. And the girls that go through that end up crying and wondering, what is this? This is a church. And when the priest is done, that girl is corrupt, and he's also corrupt. He's corrupted both of them. And I don't want to take it any further than that right now, except they get into some of the most rotten things that a human mind can get into in the name of confession. One of the theological books of the Roman Catholics asks the question, well, if the priest has to do this, and he himself is corrupted in the process, and his flesh rises up, and he can't do anything about it, is he to be blamed? And of course the theological works say, well, of course not. He's doing his work as a priest. He cannot be corrupted by this process. Well, he is. I'm going to read now Great Controversy 567. This degrading confession of man to man is the secret spring from which the evil that's defiling the world and fitting it for its final destruction. It's coming out of what that priest is doing to everybody that sits in front of him, confessing their sin, and when it's not enough, he figures some good questions to ask them to corrupt their minds. So you thought the confessional was just somebody saying, well, this week I cheated on my income tax. That's not what's going on in there. Why do you think there is so much going on right now between the priests and child molestation? They get those children in those confessionals, and they corrupt those children and tell them things they never thought about and get them to thinking they're such horrible things. And then he says, well, I'll help you out. It's part of the system. I don't know why people can't figure that out. Priests don't end up this way by themselves. They're made to be this way because of the religion they have. Roman Catholicism is one of the foulest things that ever happened to this planet, and we think it's a Church of Christ. It has nothing to do with God. Nothing. Is it any wonder God says through the Spirit of Prophecy writings, we are to abhor it? I don't have any problem abhorring it. I'm sorry. I don't have any problem. But then Ellen White says something we need to pay attention to here. It is more palatable to human nature to do penance than to renounce sin. Huh? It is easier to mortify the flesh by sackcloth and nettles and galling chains than to crucify fleshly lusts. Heavy is the yoke which the carnal heart is willing to bear, rather than bow to the yoke of Christ. Now, isn't that something? Yeah. Hit me with sharp pieces of metal, make me bleed, I'll do that. But to receive the gift of Jesus, of eternal life, no, I'm not ready for that. Who are we anyhow? You see, it's not just that system, it's human nature that's involved here. That system is the church of the flesh. I'm not going to get to the writings I wanted to get to today. We'll save it for next time. I want to continue with Great Controversy for just now. The worship of images and relics, the invocation of saints, the exaltation of the Pope are devices of Satan to attract the minds of the people from God and from His Son. Now, when we read those sentences, I hope you're getting The weight of it. Relics, images, Pope, all of it from Satan. That's what that sentence said. Don't think church, you think Satan. It's to keep people away from Jesus. All of it. It's a war against God. She uses that phrase in here too. In the days of Rome's supremacy, there were instruments of torture to compel assent to her doctrines. I just want you to hear that word torture a few times, because it's in the newspapers, and the things they're saying is not what my Bible says. Torture is out of the mind of the devil. When a Christian says, I believe in torture, I'm not going to believe that's a Christian. I'm sorry. No Christian has ever said that. Page 570. If we desire to understand the determined cruelty of Satan, manifested for hundreds of years, not among those who never heard of God, but in the very heart and throughout the extent of Christendom, we have only to look at the history of Romanism through this mammoth system of deception. She didn't call it a Christian church. God's people know better than to call it a church. Through this mammoth system of deception, the prince of evil accomplishes his purpose of bringing dishonor to God and wretchedness to man. Now, you have this book at home. And I know you've read this chapter. You better go back and read it again and see what it says. This is not a novel. This is the mind of God telling you something. His church is not like the Roman Catholic system. The papacy is just what the prophecy declared she would be. The apostasy of the latter times. 2 Thessalonians 2, verses 3 and 4. It is a part of her policy to assume the character which will best accomplish her purpose. And I'll read you that one too when we get to it from the priest's own writings. That priests are taught that it is correct and smart to not let people know who you are. Yeah, let them think whatever they want to think. Just stay a buddy. But don't let them know you're a slave of the Pope. Ellen White quotes a Catholic work, L'Enfant. It says, quote, faith ought not to be kept with heretics, nor persons suspected of heresy. I will read you another quote when I get to it. A priest was talking to his bishop, and they had established a school. And one of the big people in the city, a Protestant, wanted to have their children educated with the best education, so they decided to put them in that Catholic school. And he asked the bishop, he says, will you teach my child what schools teach and not teach him your religion? We have a religion. And the bishop said, we will do nothing to interfere with that child's religion. And then the priest went to the bishop and says, well, we teach all the children Catholicism. How could you make that statement to that man? He said, well, it's very simple. To protest is not to create a religion. When you protest, you're protesting against the religion. And you don't make out a religion out of a protest. Protestantism is not a religion, it's a heresy. I did not promise anything I would not keep. That child does not have a religion. That's the way it works all the time. Lies from one end to the other, and you never know what's happening. Now, I'm only telling you things I can document. I have pages for everything I'm telling you, and I want to get to them as we go through some of this. I want you to understand that liberty of conscience is not possible where the Roman Catholic mind is operating. And you don't have to call yourself a Roman Catholic to have that mind. Shall this power, and I want to remind you, we are reading something here we all claim to believe is from God. Shall this power, whose record for 1,000 years is written in the blood of the saints, be now acknowledged as a part of the church of Christ? I can't do it. I hope you're fast getting there. There's no way I can call the papacy part of Christianity. I can't do that. My mind doesn't register that way. I see it for what it is, and I only see parts of it. It's what Satan invented to fool people into thinking they were getting something from Christianity. It is not without reason that the claim has been put forth in Protestant countries that Catholicism differs less widely from Protestantism in the former times. There has been a change. Is that what we discussed earlier? There has been a change, but the change is not in the papacy. Catholicism indeed resembles much of the Protestantism that now exists because Protestantism has so greatly degenerated since the days of the Reformers. You say that to a Protestant minister and see what you get. No, I don't suggest you do that. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just trying to get your brain to understand the issues here. Because you know it's dangerous to do anything that goes differently from what the masses believe today. We have a truth to say. We have a Jesus to uphold. We have a third angel's message, a warning to this world. But we need to know why we're out there doing it. There is a real need. If we don't do it, who's going to do it? All right, I think I have time to get through this. I'm on page 573. In past ages, when men were without God's word and without knowledge of the truth, their eyes were blindfolded and thousands were ensnared, not seeing the net spread for their feet. In this generation, there are many whose eyes become dazzled by the glare of human speculations. All right, you tell me, what is the name for human speculation today? Science, falsely so called. You know, when the people in Kansas at the school board there said we should teach Evolution as one option, and we should teach creation as another option. The school board in Kansas stood up and said that, and they voted it. And they said, we're not buying any more books that just promote one side. We want to see both sides of the issue here. Oh, this whole country went up. Not only this country, from England, they were sending letters to these ignorant, unscientific Kansas people who don't know anything. And I thought that was bad enough. The school, the educational system, the NSA for the whole country got on their back and said, we will stop sending you money. Evolution is a scientific fact. What are you doing, you ignorant people? And I thought all of that was bad enough, but then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes Andy Rooney. Oh, no. And he says to the national press, get rid of those ignorant people. Yeah, that's what he said. You need a better school board than that. Science, falsely so called. I can't break it. This is one of the longest sentences I see in the Spirit of Prophecy. It's almost a whole page, one sentence. I'm going to try to break into it here. Okay. God, here we go. God designed that man's intellectual power should be held as a gift from the Maker and should be employed in the service of truth and righteousness. But when pride and ambition are cherished and men exalt their own theories above the Word of God, then intelligence can accomplish greater harm than ignorance. Thus, the false science of the present day, which undermines faith in the Bible, will prove as successful in preparing the way for the acceptance of the papacy. Did you get that? The so-called scientists of today are preparing the world to receive the papacy. You say, well, how can that be? Well, how do you make a connection? Well, it's really easy. What does evolution teach? Brute power. The strong overcoming the weak. Well, don't scientists realize that what they're teaching is that you cannot have a Republican form of government? You can't have a republic made up of the strong ones beating up on the weak ones. A republic is designed so that the weak ones have some rights. Every day in the school systems, which are Jesuit-inspired, are teaching the Pope is right. If you haven't thought about these things, I hope you get back in these books and see God's telling us things. In the movements now in progress. Now remember when she said this. This is way back before jet planes. This before iPods. In the movements now in progress in the United States to secure for the institutions and the usages of the church the support of the state, Protestants are following in the steps of the papists. You don't mean Tom DeLay, do you? You don't mean, I better not give you a list of the people out there who are doing things. Maybe I'll give you one. Romney? Does anybody know that name? Do you know what Mormons believe? They have a pope. They believe the same thing the Roman Catholics believe. They even have a priesthood to back it up. Do you know that Abraham Lincoln named the Mormons as one of the biggest threats to religious liberty in this country? That's right. Lincoln understood. He understood lots of things he doesn't get credit for. Well, I'm not going to say any more, but we have stuff happening all around us we don't even see. Nay, more. They, the Protestants, are opening the door for the papacy. You get that? The Catholics don't have to do it. The Protestants will do it for them. To regain in Protestant America the supremacy which she has lost in the old world. And the fact gives greater significance to this movement, or wait a minute, that which gives greater significance to this movement is the fact that the principal object contemplated is the enforcement of Sunday. A custom which originated with Rome. Do you think that if Romney were to be elected, he would not be pursuing Sunday? I talked to two Mormon fellows just this week. I asked them to give me something. They can't do it, but they don't know it yet. I asked them to get me a revelation from one of their prophets that says the Sabbath was changed from Saturday to Sunday. Because that's what it would take even in the Mormon church. And they said, well, why would that be so important? I said, because in the book of Mosiah, the book of Mormon, it says the seventh day is the Sabbath. That's why. In your books, it says the seventh day. I said, so somebody had to change it. I may never see them again, but they've got something to think about. I told them to read their own books. Maybe we ought to read ours. Yeah. I'm not scolding you. We're all the same. We get lazy. Let Dr. George research it. He'll tell me. No. Dr. George is going to miss it. Now, I'm just hitting around here. You get into this chapter and you really dig it out and you go after it and you see if it doesn't tell you things. We just hit parts of it here. We're almost done. I don't want to get into her arguments on the Sabbath and Sunday here. That's not what we're dealing with today. There's some tremendous material in here. On page 575, the decrees of councils. This is after some history. The decrees of councils proved insufficient. The secular authorities were besought to issue an edict that would strike terror to the hearts of the people and force them to refrain from labor on the Sunday. That's coming again. The people today who are the largest group among the Protestants, the evangelicals, are pushing for this right now. Close everything down on Sunday. We're all going to be religious. On Sunday, of course. They're not so happy just at the moment. It'd be interesting to see how it turns out. For this couple of years, they were saying, our man's in the White House. He's one of us. That's our man. We put him there.
they're not saying that so loud now. As a matter of fact, Dobson just recently said, if you don't start paying attention to us, we're going to turn on you. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? And you know, he made some of them shake. When all the evangelicals turn against them and say, we're going to go someplace else. Oh, wait a minute. How are we going to win elections? Oh, there's some interesting things going on. But they're only interesting if you're not a Democrat and you're not a Republican. If you're either one, what you see out there is just going to make you mad. One way or the other. If you join a party, you have a major problem. You cannot stay a Christian. Christians can look at both sides of this. 3 sides now, the independents. Look at all of it and say, that one's doing that one's doing that, and that one's doing that. I don't want to be any of those, none of them. I have enough to do what God is saying. This one I thought was very interesting. Same page, 575. An appeal. An appeal was then made that priests and ministers, kings and priests, and all faithful people used their utmost endeavors and care that the day be restored to its honor and for the credit of Christianity more devotedly observed for the time to come. That was back then in history, but do you know, I was browsing through the computer one day. I don't do that very often, but every now and then. And for a while, I started looking up the Vatican to see what they were up to. I just click it up and see what they do today. Who did he talk to today? What's their plans for next week? And then this popped up. Dies Domini. Dies Domini. The Pope has spoken on the subject of Sunday. There's about 37 pages of it, and I read it all as I was sitting there. He begins by saying the creation week, the first day of creation. Of course, that's Sunday. The first day of creation. And then God established a rhythm. He made the 7th day the day of rest. And he goes through the Old Testament, and it's all there, just the way it really reads. And you say, how can this man, after doing all of this, switch to Sunday? How's he going to do that? But he does. He says, now, in Jesus, he establishes a new rhythm that comes every week in honor of his resurrection power, to make a born-again Christian, to do this and that and that. And he says, and we changed the day, we Christians. Eusebius is the one that said that. And what he was saying was the Roman Catholic Church changed the day from Saturday to Sunday. That's what Eusebius was saying, and the Pope quotes that. We changed the day from the 7th day to the first day, which will forever be blessed. And then he goes on from there. Every time he says Lord's Day, it's Sunday. And you know what? He uses the arguments that I have heard any number of Protestant ministers use. The same ones. The daughters. This is exactly the way the Bible said it was going to be. It's exactly the way it reads in these books. We ought to cherish all of these. We ought to get into them and see, well, how's this shaping up here? Because it's all in here. We're just halfway through the first chapter. We're going to look at 3 chapters here. You can look at anything you want in here, but I want to tell you, we're going to be pulling some things out that don't jump right out at you. You've got to look at it carefully and see, how does that match up with what I know today? What did I hear recently? What's going on? We're going to end with a chapter of the Scriptures, a safeguard. We're going to find out how come we need to get back to being the people of the book. Spirit prophecy is good, but if you don't know the Bible, spirit prophecy is going to be confusing to you. I can guarantee it. All right, maybe that's enough for today. You can see why these kinds of meetings are not open to the public. Okay? We're here to try to get to the rock bottom of things. And God has prepared us so we can do that. Because we're not going to go saying these things to the neighbors, but we have to know them. Okay? We have to have them, so we're not going to get confused. We talk to them about the Bible and try to help them understand salvation. And God will take them the rest of the way. He has a way of doing that. All right, let's have prayer. Father, we thank you that you have revealed these things to us, not as just bits of information, but to sense that everything is going according to plan. You knew all about it. You have told us. You have a people for the emergency. Bless us as we recognize that you're not going to pour things into us. We need to spend some time. We need to pray. We need to hear your voice. We need to know that we're connected. Bless us, Lord, as more and more we recognize the importance of the time that we're living in and the experience we need to have. Bless us, Lord, as we look into the Spirit of Prophecy writings. There's so much material there. Help us to see what it means for us right now. And may your word speak to us in a new and complete way. You've told us to study Daniel and Revelation, that if we do, we will have a completely different religious experience. Guide us, Lord. Help us to see these last day events. We thank you in Jesus' precious name. Amen.